CAT is a statewide tenants' rights organization that's been in existence since about 1996, and we have 5,000 members across the state with particular concentrations in about 7 or 8 different counties, some of which are here today: Jackson County, Washington County, Multnomah County, Clackamas County, Marion, Polk, Coos, and most recently Josephine. So I'm here to talk today a little bit about what being a renter is. A few quick notes about us. I'm not doing it right. There we go. CAT has been serving renters since 1996. We serve tenants through educational programs, organizing and advocacy, and services like evictions, counseling, home visits, workshops, and political education. We've served about 50,000 renters since we've opened on our hotline. We've trained about 400 leaders, tenant leaders, about telling their stories and becoming tenant leaders in their buildings and in their communities. We've served hundreds of tenants in collective bargaining opportunities to bargain for better outcomes, and we've mobilized thousands of tenants to share their stories with training to support. So I'd like to take you on a journey. This is Hannah and Esau. They are an African-American family in Oregon, and they are the picture of an African-American family in Oregon as described by the 2017 ACS estimates. They make about $52,395 a year, and I want to note that this is family income as opposed to household income. African-American household income, according to 2017 ACS estimates, is around $37,009. So Hannah and Esau are doing pretty darn well. They just had their first baby. Their median rent in Oregon is $1,282, and they make approximately 3.4 times their rent. They're lucky. They're not necessarily rent burdened. So here's a little bit of what their budget looks like. They recently received a 13% rent increase from $1,282 to $1,450 and found themselves in the red at $30. So they have to make a decision, and this is some of the stuff that we run into at Community Alliance of Tenants on a regular basis. The question is, what can I cut in order to support my rent increase? So some things that they're considering could be, I can move my checkup next month. I don't think that's such a great idea because Hannah just had a baby. Probably not a good idea. Esau has considered maybe going to half days so they can cut their child care in half, but then that means less money in the door. They've considered income-driven repayment plans on their student loans, which you saw a little bit ago in their budget was about $500, specifically the repay program. Or maybe they can get some canned goods or a food box at the end of the month and cut on some groceries. So they weigh their options and decide that they're going to go with the repay loan program, and they end up with a net gain of $260 per month in their budget. So sure, they're in debt a little bit longer, may not necessarily be able to buy a house, as we heard a little bit earlier, but that's okay. They can make it. Now let's layer some socioeconomic and health factors, which is something that we experience at CAT on a regular basis. Particularly African-American families are more likely to develop conditions related to chronic inflammation, which is a well-documented phenomenon that we see, such as high blood pressure or diabetes. Unfortunately, Hannah gets hospitalized for uncontrolled blood pressure for 1 to 2 days. She ends up with a hospital bill of $3,400, and they decide to get on a payment plan of $150. So then they go back to the scenario. What can we cut? They decided moving their checkup at the doctor is really not a good idea. Definitely can't go half days of childcare because that means less money in the house. They've already exhausted the option of cutting their student loans. Maybe they can get canned goods, and then this dark cloud over here is maybe we can just move, which is a dark cloud because they just had a child, and that interrupting that child's routine is probably not a great idea. So they finally decide that they're going to consider some cuts on groceries. This is something that we hear at Community Alliance of Tenants far too often. People cutting their grocery budgets in half, people cutting their medications in half. It's really a saddening phenomenon. But now they're only $30 short. So baby's getting older, they'll cut some diapers, get Loves instead of Pampers. So they get a net gain of $40. And they're about $10 over, so yeah, they're paycheck to paycheck, but eventually living paycheck to paycheck isn't necessarily a good idea. So what we end up hearing is that people decide to move. And in fact, according to ACS data, since 2007, approximately 30% of Oregon renters move on an annual basis, despite the economic downturn and upturn. Now, what if Hannah and Esau receive services? rent assistance, financial assistance from the hospital, write-off from the ambulance, perhaps utility help. If they got, let's say they decided to get rent assistance at $160 per month for 6 months, maybe they decided to move and hit up a company like Join to get relocation or placement support at about $7,000. They were able to get 75% of their hospital bill written off by Providence, so it's about $2,500 off of that bill. And they get a write-off from the ambulance of $1,896, and they decided to get an extra $40 for 12 months in utility help. That rent increase for this family just cost society approximately $12,886 for one family. Now, if we scale this up, 4 in 10 Oregonians are renters. That's approximately 1.4 million people. Over 30% of renters are people of color, even though only 1 in 10 Oregonians are people of color, as we heard a little bit earlier. There's barriers to homeownership that are significant. Here's the breakdown. According to 2017 ACS estimates, 64% of Black Oregonians are renters, 56% of Latinx Oregonians are renters, 53% of American Indian and Alaska Native, 37% of Asians, 74% of Native Hawaiians, 51% of other races, and 33% of white alone. As we talked about a little bit earlier, and as we've heard as a consistent theme through today, 5 in 10 renters are rent burdened. That means they're paying more than 30% of their income on rent alone, which is not including utilities, which is approximately 51% of Oregon renters. And as a matter of fact, recent data shows that every house district across the state is rent burdened, with particular concentrations of more than 50% of their population being rent burdened in Benton, Jackson, Josephine, Klamath, Lane, Lynn, Multnomah, Polk, and Yamhill counties. In addition, in almost every unified school district, over 40% of children's households are rent burdened, with the exception of Hillsborough, which sits at 35%. Now, this is what we hear. We serve approximately 2,000 to 3,000 folks on our hotline a year, with a staff of 4 on the hotline alone, not including our building-based organizing. And stories are often complicated with other details. The story that I presented today is sort of based off of the data, but we hear about folks getting complicated with fixed incomes, issues with discrimination, issues with retaliation when they're exercising their rights for unsafe and uninhabitable conditions, folks that are dealing with disabilities that maybe have lived in a place for 20 or 30 years and having to move for receiving a rent increase that is way higher than they can afford. Of course, as we've seen in earlier presentations, stagnant wages, relocating away from routine work, services, family, and community, sometimes ending up with 2 to 3 hour commutes, and living in cars post-traumatic involuntary relocation event. So thank you for your time today. I look forward to answering the questions that you have.
Thank you, Katrina.